YouTube, today we're going to go over the Slowking, Mudsdale, Scrafty, Kyurem-Black team that I use for back-to-back battles. Let's get started and roll the episode. So why Mudsdale? Mudsdale's a really fun Pokemon. I think it was a really strong Dynamax user back in the beginning of Generation 8 competitive in the early series, and I actually had a lot of fun testing it out back in Series 9. Never got to use it in Series 10, but the fact that it got the own tempo, which does block the Intimidate, which is really cool for swagger strategies, it's just a really strong Pokemon. So I really want to see if it could be used in a Dynamax format because it can handle quite a few Pokemon. So I want to try out the Mudsdale in Trick Room with a Swagger user, and the only Pokemon that gets Trick Room and Swagger is Slowking. So I decided to team up the two and see how they would perform. So how was the team formed? Well, it started off originally with a Slowking and Mudsdale combination. Of course, Slowking, the only Pokemon that can get access to both Swagger and Trick Room in this generation. So I felt like, you know what, this is pretty much the obvious call here, and I really do like the combination of Mudsdale plus Slowking for a pretty bulky way to set up Trick Room and then dish out a lot of damage, which I felt like is really nice. And then the next Pokemon, I wanted my restricted Pokemon. I knew I was weak to Venusaur and other grass types, so I was thinking about it. And then I originally was planning on running a Lum Berry Dialga because I've considered physical Dialga after seeing like one singles tournament which had like all the Dialgas were basically like bulk up for some reason. I felt like, is this okay? And I felt like, you know what, it's probably okay. I could probably try it out. I would have the Lum Berry on the Dialga, but then afterward I looked again at the list of restricted, and then, you know what, I was like, wait, why don't I just use Kyurem-Black? It helps against Venusaur damage output wise, and yeah, that could actually really be effective. So I changed the Dialga to Kyurem-Black. Maybe I'll use physical Dialga in the future, but yeah, I really thought that Kyurem-Black, you know, it's a Pokemon I haven't really used too much in the series. I don't think I used it in Series 11. I believe I used it in Series 8 for sure. I might have used it in Series 10, but I do not remember. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid restricted. It's one of my favorite restricteds. I think it has a lot of potential. Of course, the fairy restrictions do give it some trouble, but overall it's a very solid restricted against a lot of the common stuff like the weather teams. It can do a decent amount of work. I have the Kyurem-Black on the team. So for the next Pokemon, I knew I needed a Fake Out and Intimidate mod to help set up the Trick Room for the Slowking, and it was between Incineroar and Scrafty, of course. The Dark typing is a really big plus because it does help out against the Shadow Rider Calyxes. A Ghost Switch and a Dark Switch is always really nice. So it was between those two Pokemon, and I thought about like the cons and the pros with each of them. And I felt like, you know what, I kind of want to go Scrafty here. Now, the reason I want to go Scrafty is because they have very similar roles. Both of them can get access to Swagger, so they can be used as a backup mod for Swagger. I really like having that option because in the games I can't bring Slowking, I'll still have another way to set up the Mudsdale or the Kyurem-Black pretty safely. I felt like, you know, it's between Incineroar and Scrafty. They both had that Swagger option. Scrafty's speed tier is actually nice because that if I go with the Incineroar, I have to invest a little bit more speed investment into the Mudsdale, which, you know, might be great and, you know, might be wasted EVs. So depending on, like, you know, maybe I'll miss a knockout, or maybe I'll like not live a move by like a little bit more if I had that investment. But overall, there was also another reason. That's the reason is I would definitely want the dark coverage, and with Incineroar, if I brought Incineroar, I wanted the fire coverage, right? So I would have fire move, dark move, Fake Out on the Incineroar, and then it would be Swagger last move, and that means I wouldn't have Punish on a U-turn, which is like one of the main reasons why I would probably use Incineroar for most of it. So I thought, like, you know, I'd rather have like a good fire type. I would like a special attacking fire type if possible. So I felt like, you know, and if I can't use Punish Shot or U-turn, I'd rather just go Scrafty there and use another fire type. So I just ended up going with the Scrafty here, and it felt like it was pretty good, I think, for the most part. And it was pretty solid. It had pretty much what I wanted. Lash Out, of course, the coverage for the Calyxes, the ghost types, the close combat, which is really nice for the dark types. Fake Out, of course, support, and then Swagger, and I'm not really missing out that much with Scrafty that I wouldn't already want on it. So yeah, added Scrafty. Next Pokemon was the fire type. No, it's between probably Rotom Heat and Chandelure, I think, for the most part. Heatran was a little bit tempting as well, but I felt like I didn't need the Steel type. And yeah, I felt like Chandelure was pretty good because it's another backup Trick Room setter, which I really wanted on the team, because in case Slowking can't get the Trick Room up, I felt like, you know what, I think Chandelure is pretty good. It's decent against Zacians as well. Helps out against Rillaboom while setting up Trick Room. So I felt like it was a pretty solid pick. And then the last Pokemon was the Regieleki here, because I think Regieleki, I needed a Pokemon that can handle the bulky water types, and I didn't want to have Rillaboom on the team because I already had so many physical attackers at that point. I only had Chandelure as like my main special attacker, so I wanted another Pokemon that was a good special attacker that could dish out some good damage against the bulky waters, especially like Kyogre offense teams, which I felt like this team little bit struggle against. So I felt like, you know what, I'll go with the Eliki, and that was how the 6 was formed. All right, let's go over the items, the EV spreads, and the movesets of the team. We have the safety goggles Slowking up first with the Oblivious ability with Ice Beam, Swagger, Trick Room, and Protect. Now, Slowking is the only Pokemon, as I mentioned before, that can get the combination of both Swagger and Trick Room in the generation. So I really want to pair up the Slowking with the Mudsdale. And I brought the safety goggles on the Slowking because I didn't know how common Amoonguss was still. I don't think it's really that common, but it is a thing that could redirect the Swaggers, which would be a little bit annoying. I thought, you know what, let's give the goggles on the Slowking. I couldn't really think of another item other than maybe potentially a Wakan Berry or maybe even a Rindo Berry, which I also consider. But you know what, I felt like I could probably play around the electric and the grass moves that would be targeted into Slowking and just give it the safety goggles as a safety measure. Oblivious in order to prevent taunt, which is really nice. It prevents the Grimmsnarls from going for taunt in the Slowking and any other Pokemon that want to prevent getting the Trick Room up with the Slowking using the move taunt. And it is really nice to have just to make sure that I am pretty safe against those Pokemon. I just have to worry about like maybe fake outs. So Ice Beam, Swagger, Trick Room, Protect. Swagger and Trick Room, of course, to support the Mudsdale. Protect, of course, for positioning the Slowking to make sure I can get Trick Rooms up or position Mudsdale pretty safely for the Swagger combination. And then Ice Beam. So I thought about Ice Beam or Flamethrower. Now, of course, I could run Stab, but I really didn't think Slowking was going to be the damage dealer. I really thought it was just going to mainly be a support mod, getting a Swagger up for either my Kyurem or my Mudsdale. So I was debating on, ooh, what move do I want to go for? I think it was between Flamethrower and Ice Beam. I had Flamethrower as an idea because Ferrothorn could be annoying, of course, because I would need multiple Swaggers to match up the Iron defenses that Ferrothorn could provide. Or I would like Ice Beam because it would be able to help out against Landorus-Varian. And I thought like Landorus-Varian would be more common that I'd be facing. So like if I have Slowking and Mudsdale, I always had that Ice Beam option. I didn't have to force my Mudsdale to like go for Steel Spikes or like just slowly chipping away the Landorus. So I really did think the Ice Beam was correct here. I've been looking back at it. Every time I had Ice Beam, I wish I had Flamethrower, and then in testing, whenever I had Flamethrower, I wanted Ice Beam. So it wasn't a win-win. So I think it really just comes down to preference. I think after playing the team a bit more, I think I would probably enjoy Flamethrower a little bit more on the team, but it's really up to personal preference. The EV spread is really just supposed to be a bulky Slowking, of course. I have a lot of special defense because of Pokemon like Shadow Rider, Calyrex, and you know, Kyogre Water Spout, which I do want to kind of tank. So I really did think that Slowking was the best option here to have a special defensive set. And then, you know, I have Intimidate on the Scrafty so I can make up for the physical side, and it also resists like Zacian's Behemoth Blade and Sacred Swords, which is really nice in general. So I felt like, you know, I can afford to invest a lot into special defense. Gave it a stat point where it gave it a +1 boost, and then give it the rest into the physical defense, and it would still take it pretty well, especially with the Intimidate from Scrafty as support. So next up, we have Kyurem-Black with the Lum Berry and Teravolt for the ability with Icicle Spear, Fusion Bolt, Dragon Claw, and Protect. Now, I think Kyurem-Black is a fantastic restricted if it wasn't for like Pokemon like Zacian and Xerneas that always give Kyurem-Black some trouble, because it's really good against a lot of other restricteds. For instance, it's really good against Kyogre. It's really good against, for instance, the Groudons. It's good against a lot of them, but then the fairy restricteds just make this thing a lot harder to use. I mean, otherwise, I think Kyurem-Black would have a lot of potential, and I still think it does. You just have to really play well against those Zacian teams. So I think having the lower usage of Xerneas really did help me in justifying Kyurem-Black, and the fact that it helped against Venusaur a bit more than Dialga, which I originally had on the team. So I felt like it was a pretty strong option. So Lum Berry, of course, for the Swagger combination, since I had 2 Swagger users, I thought, you know what, I could have Lum Berry on the Kyurem, and it would be able to deal a lot of damage to +2. It's also pretty decent speed stat for the Trick Room, especially in a fast-paced meta that we currently have. And then, of course, Terravolt's really nice. Of course, being able to break through stuff like Lugia's multi-scale and other abilities is just really nice. Icicle Spear, Fusion Bolt, Dragon Claw, Protect, pretty much just coverage. Icicle Spear and Fusion Bolt you really want. Dragon Claw, not necessary, but I felt like, you know, Max Dragon to lower the attacks is really nice. And I really do like hitting the Dragon types like Eternatus, for instance. I did consider Rock Slide at one point, and also Iron Head and Shadow Claw. I even thought about not having Protect at one point, but I felt like Protect was just really good, especially since, like, you know, there are a lot of threats to Kyurem-Black out there, especially on the Zacian teams, which I think is really important. So having Protect, I feel like, was pretty necessary. And yeah, I like the Dragon Claw option, as I mentioned before, Max Dragon attack drop. it's really solid and it's pretty good damage output. And then for the EV spread, I knew I wanted Kyurem to be a pretty heavy tank while also dishing out a bunch of damage. Now, normally when you have a really high base HP stat like Kyurem, I would probably invest it more into the individual defenses than I would into HP. But I felt like there wasn't really much I was like EVing for specifically. There wasn't like a calc that was like, oh, this is absolutely best. So I was like, I tried to figure out something, and then I just decided, you know what, it's probably just better to have it more into HP. I gave an HP stat where it can give me a little bit more from like grassy terrain, for instance, healing wise, and of course a little bit of an odd HP stat for like Super Fang Nature's Madness stuff, or 51% HP remaining after the attack. And then I put most of it into attack where it gives me a +1 stat point, and then I ended up adding a little bit into special defense. Overall, I do think the EV spread could definitely be adjusted. I don't think it needs all this attack, but of course the reason I do have this even with the +2 is because, you know, swagger can miss. Sometimes there'll be situations where I'm, you know, playing defensive and I won't be able to get a self swagger off, so I still want Kyurem to do a lot of damage. I felt like, you know what, I'm fine with max attack. This thing's pretty bulky in general, especially with Intimidate support, so I felt like I didn't exactly need all the bulk. I think it would have been nice, but I don't think it was necessary. But yeah, I think it comes down to personal preference. I think the Kyurem just really worked out at the end of the day, and it was really fun to use. I really do love this restricted Pokemon. Next Pokemon we have is the Focus Sash Chandelure with the Flash Fire ability with Heat Wave, Shadow Ball, Trick Room, and Protect. Now, Chandelure, this was an interesting Pokemon. I really do think it is really solid. Now, it could be a little bit better because I feel like its speed set, if this thing could outspeed, I think this Pokemon has so much potential, but unfortunately it's just like a few points slower with a Choice Scarf than Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and Zacian, which is a real big shame because I think if it had that, this thing would be dominant, especially with like Infiltrator to hit through the Zacian substitute and then like KO with Overheat. Man, that would be so nice. So I have to Focus Sash Chandelure though, and we are using what it is. It is a Trick Room mon, and it is pretty solid as an offensive capabilities. We have the Flash Fire, of course, for absorbing the fire type attacks. Now, I actually don't know what's actually better because Infiltrator actually did come into play. It would have came into play, and I would have actually enjoyed using it, but I like the Flash Fire just as a switch in for fire type moves like Charizard, Heat Wave, Torkoal, Eruptions. I'm not exactly sure at the end of the day. I think I would keep Flash Fire because like switching to Torkoal for free seems pretty solid. But I can justify Infiltrator. I think it could be really good against like certain Zacian teams. So it really just comes down to preference at the end of the day. I chose Flash Fire because I think like having the boost as well as the, you know, free switching to Torkoal and like Heat Waves was pretty solid. So it really just comes down to preference. Heat Wave, Shadow Ball, Trick Room, Protect. So Heat Wave, of course, for the damage output, it's really strong. Makes it hard for like things like Zacian Rillaboom teams to really switch into it effectively. Shadow Ball, of course, for good coverage, hits really hard. Trick Room, of course, because this is a Trick Room team. And then Protect. So there is the Imprison Chandelure, which is probably one of the more common sets. I don't need Imprison on the team. And I felt like having Protect could be really nice for positioning, especially with Scrafty and Intimidate. And yeah, so I felt like Protect was just really good. And some players might not expect Protect Chandelure and would get caught off guard if I do go for the Protect as they focus down the Chandelure, thinking it's an easy target. But having that Protect could really change it. EV spread is very simple. I went with max special attack, max speed with a 4 in the remaining in defenses. So you might be wondering, why am I fast Chandelure with Trick Room? Because I have max speed on the Chandelure, even though that this is mainly a Trick Room team. Now, the main reason I have the speed investment is because Chandelure bulk doesn't really change too much. Maybe there'll be some grassy glide calcs at the end of the day that could screw me over if Chandelure is weakened. But overall, Chandelure is kind of a frail Pokemon. I don't exactly have a fast mode, and I thought, you know what? Since I had Eliki on the team, I originally did have max HP, but I changed it to max speed because, you know what? I was thinking, I want the max special attack for sure. Chandelure hits really hard. I want the Heat Waves to do as much as Zacian. And then I thought, you know, I could go for Electro Web with Regieleki, outspeed a lot of the common Adamant Zacians out there into Electro Web Heat Wave combinations, and they might not expect it. And I might be able to like pick up some surprise knockouts immediately. So I felt like that was a potential reason of like, you know what, that actually has potential. So that is the reason why I decided to go with the max speed. Overall, I didn't really miss the bulk on the Chandelure. It really didn't change anything, I think, matchup wise, as it would usually just go down to its sash anyway for the most part. And yeah, the speed could be nice and catch some opponents off guard, especially like in a Trick Room mirror. So I really do like having the max speed, and I think it worked out just fine. I could have went Timid with the Chandelure, but I felt like Timid was just way too fast for Trick Room, especially even if the Electro Web numbers did seem very tempting. I think that Focus Sash was just better at the end of the day as well. So next up, we got the Assault Vest Mudsdale with the Own Temple ability with high horsepower, heavy slam, close combat, and rock slide. So Mudsdale, absolute threat with Dynamax and a +2 from Swagger. Really hard to take down too. It's got pretty good bulk in general. So I really do think Mudsdale has a lot of potential, especially as a Dynamax Pokemon. And even if we like had a series where there's no restricteds and no max, I think it'd be a pretty solid Pokemon as well. It was really good in 2017, and I think it has a lot of potential to shine in the Generation 8 series. So I really do like Assault Vest Mudsdale. It really just helps out with its lower special defense stat. Has pretty good bulk. It's really hard to take down with Intimidate and that Assault Vest. Own Temple for the ability, of course. Preventing Intimidate as a buff in Gen 8, as well as like Swagger combinations, is really awesome. So having Own Temple ability is a no-brainer here because I am trying to abuse that Swagger. So we got high horsepower, heavy slam, close combat, rock slide. Pretty standard moveset. High horsepower, of course, for the ground coverage. Heavy slam, of course, for the max steel spikes. Close combat is really nice as a damage dealer, especially with the max knuckle combination. And then you have rock slide for, you know, Charizard and a few other flying types out there. It's really good coverage. Has the option to boost its defenses with the max and dish out a bunch of damage. Makes this thing really hard to switch into and boost up its defenses, so it's really hard to take care of. It's a really big threat. For the EV spread, I knew I wanted a lot of bulk, and I still want to attack because I want this thing to pick up the KOs at +2 for sure. So I went with almost near max HP. I didn't think max HP was absolutely necessary, so I felt like, you know, having that 205 is just okay for the most part. I didn't really notice any calc changes between max HP and the 236 HP investment. I felt like it was fine to have this number. 196, that gives me an extra +1 in attack from the stat point with the Adamant Nature. The 4 defense was remaining. I wanted a bit more into the special defense, so I invested most of it into special defense that I have remaining. And the 12 speed, so the 12 speed actually matters. You might be wondering, why am I not like min speed, for instance? And the main reason is because of the Mudsdale Scrafty speed tiers, because this allows me in under Trick Room for Scrafty to be slower than the Mudsdale or faster than Mudsdale in Trick Room and get the Swagger out before Mudsdale can attack. So that's the reason why I have Adamant max speed IVs as well as a 12 investment. That is the absolute minimum in order for Mudsdale to be slower than Scrafty under the Trick Room, so the Swagger combination can go off. So that is the reason for the speed EVs. Overall, Mudsdale, a really fun Pokemon to use. It's really strong, and you know, it can be frustrating if you miss the Swagger because that could be a lot of momentum just swung, but it's a really good Dynamax Pokemon, and it can go absolutely insane. Really hard for some teams to handle. Next Pokemon we have is the Roseli Berry Scrafty with the Intimidate ability with Lash Out, Close Combat, Fake Out, and Swagger. So I did think about running Incineroar, but I felt like, you know what, Scrafty has a lot of potential on this team. Why not try it out? And I felt like for the item, I wasn't sure because I normally run a Assault Vest Scrafty, so Roseli Berry was a little bit of a change here. And I was thinking, what can I really put on the Scrafty? I could give it like a Lum Berry, but I felt like it wasn't too important. And then I thought about, like, you know what, I'll probably be facing a lot of Whimsicots and maybe Grimmsnarls, and they are probably going to fire from Moonblast and Spirit Break. And I thought, you know what, I'll give it to Roseli Berry because the Fake Out could be like really helpful. Like if I'm leading Chandelure plus Scrafty, I could go for the Fake Out Trick Room and live like a Moonblast or something. And then afterward, I can go for a Self Swagger because the Scrafty is still alive. So I felt like, you know what, Roseli Berry seems pretty nice. Pinch Berry or Citrus Berry could have worked too, but I felt like it really wasn't necessary. And yeah, it just didn't feel like it was like a important factor of having the HP remaining on Scrafty most of the time. So I felt like having a Roseli Berry was just okay, so it could like at least take the hits that I was worried about. Otherwise, it would just be able to survive most attacks and usually able to get the Self Swagger off anyway. I didn't really feel like I needed healing if I was already surviving the attacks regardless. So we have, of course, Lash Out, Close Combat, Fake Out, and Swagger. Of course, Fake Out to help support the Trick Room. Lash Out and Close Combat for the damage output, especially Lash Out for, like, you know, Shadow Dark Calyxes, which is pretty scary for this team to handle. Close Combat for the damage output, especially against Incineroar. And Swagger as a backup in case I'm not bringing Slowking, for instance, to set up the Trick Room. I like having a backup on the Scrafty. And yeah, being able to Swagger to Kyurem or the Mudsdale is pretty nice. And so for the EV spread, I went with a max defense Scrafty. Now normally I would go with like a near max attack Scrafty, but since I'm not really doing damage output, and the Scrafty is really more of a support Pokemon than anything, I felt like I really didn't need the max attack, especially since the damage I don't think was as important as like surviving, getting the swaggers and fake outs off. I felt like, you know what, I'm just going to put into defense because I'm pretty comfortable with just having a little bit in special defense since it's already pretty high. And it could really help out against like our Shifu, which is a Pokemon that is a little bit annoying to the team, I think, which is pretty nice. But I felt like, you know, being able to live those close combats from our Shifu, you know, some fighting moves from potentially Zacians if they don't have play rough, I feel like it's pretty nice. So I felt like in general that the max defense set was the way to go pretty much. So I went with like max HP, I went with like near max defense, and then I had a little bit extra into special defense. And it was a pretty good Scrafty. It's able to tank attacks, a good backup for Swagger, which is always really nice to have on the team in case I can't bring Slowking or Slowking gets knocked out pretty early. I like having that backup, and I think Scrafty was a great Pokemon on this team. The last Pokemon might seem strange. It's a Choice Scarf Regieleki with Transistor for the ability with Thunder, Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, and Electroweb. So you might be thinking, why Choice Scarf Eleki on a Trick Room team? So this Eleki, I feel like, was to help me with some certain matchups. I was a little bit scared of like Helping Hand support next to like a Dynamax Pokemon knocking out my Slowking immediately, or like Kyurem Rain teams, because I don't really like leading Chandelure with that situation. I felt like, okay, what's a Pokemon that can help me against that? I thought about Rillaboom, but I felt like I had too many physical attackers. So I want a special attacker that could deal well against like the Kyurem teams as well as Rain. So my first instance, like, Choice Scarf Eleki makes sense. And the reason I want Choice Scarf is because if the Whimsicott goes for Tailwind and then I don't outspeed it, it can be a little bit problematic. So I felt like having the Choice Scarf was pretty nice. It's a great way to revenge KO, I think, late in the game, as it can be a good cleanupper once Mudsdale or Kyurem has done a lot of damage to their team. Eleki, really hard to outspeed, and it could just like pick up some quick knockouts, which is really good on weakened Pokemon. So I really like that, and I felt it helped against those hyper offensive teams with Helping Hand and Dynamax that could really like screw me up setting up the Trick Room. So I have that Choice Scarf Eleki here with the Thunder, Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, and Electroweb. And then the EV spread, I didn't really adjust it too much. I just had the Eleki and I just changed it to a Choice Scarf. Max special attack, max speed, 4 defense with Intimidate Nature. I did miss a few KOs with Eleki, so I would definitely prefer Modest on the team. But overall, Eleki was actually pretty strong as a backup answer. And yeah, they wouldn't expect a Choice Scarf, so I could usually really surprise them in a way. And it'd be really nice for Eleki to pick up some really heavy damage or some quick knockouts right away, or some good chip damage with Volt Switch, and then, you know, pivot into like Scrafty, for instance. So I felt like overall, like, I really do enjoy the Choice Scarf Eleki. I think I went overkill, and I was really thinking about like other things I could go for. I wasn't really sure about like what I want to optimally try to outspeed, and I felt like, you know, if I can't figure out a number, I'm gonna go max speed, because, you know, this thing outspeeds like Airstream boosted Mons under Tailwind sometimes. It's like absolutely incredible. Like, that's actually insane for like an Eleki. So this Pokemon is absolutely insane with how fast it is. So I felt like it was okay. I think I would definitely go Modest and probably try to figure it out again. But overall, great Pokemon. It ended up covering, I think, some of the weaknesses I had. Not having a fast mode. The Electra for Chandelure is a combination that could work on slower teams, and I felt like, you know, it's okay. And I felt like it really fit well on this team as the last Pokemon. So how to use the team and what are common leads with the team? Overall, this team is pretty much about setting up Trick Room and going for a Swagger into one of the setup Pokemon in Kyurem-Black or Mudsdale. It's really about getting that setup in order to dish out a lot of damage under the Trick Room, and then cleaning up by either setting up another Trick Room or, you know, cleaning up with Eleki in the late game. That's pretty much how you use the team. Common leads, I would say there are quite a few of them. Obviously, a Scrafty lead is fantastic with the Intimidate Fake Out. You could lead it with actually anything on the team. It's pretty good support. Like, you could lead Scrafty plus Regieleki, go for Volt Switch and Intimidate rotations. You could lead Scrafty with one of the Trick Room setters, Chandelure and Slowking, and it'll work effectively. Or you could lead it with one of the Swagger Mons, and they might not expect it, so you can go for like an attack, and then you can Swagger your own Mon, as maybe the opponent will double protect, for instance, and you can get like a free like setup right there for free, and it could be really good. So I think Scrafty's one of the best leads of the team. Otherwise, you have the Trick Room leads, of course. Like, they can pretty much pair up with like any offense right away, especially Slowking, because it has the option to set up Trick Room or the Swagger immediately, which is always really good. Regieleki is a really good lead, fast and pretty strong, can Volt Switch out into Scrafty or into like one of these setup mods and try to set up Trick Room, for instance, like a Slowking Eleki or Slowking Chandelure lead. And yeah, otherwise, it could just lead the offense if you really need it with like Kyurem or Mudsdale. A lot of different ways to play the matchup, just really depends on what you're facing, and a lot of different ways to set up for a Trick Room and of course a Swagger combination. And that is the show. I hope you all enjoyed the thought process that went behind the Mudsdale and Slowking team. If you did, please leave a like down below, leave a comment down below. It really does help me out. And make sure, if you haven't already, go check out the episodes with this team, as Mudsdale was absolutely fantastic. Kyurem-Black was able to put in some work as well. So make sure you go check those out. And yeah, you can try out this team. You have 2 weeks to grab with the rental code on your screen. Pay's been always available in the description down below. But thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day, people. And until we bow again, I'll catch y'all later.